Hello everybody. Um, Welcome to the intro to Illustrator video. In this video I'm going to show you and demonstrate how the interface works and where all the tools and panels and the things that you need to know in order to learn the basics of Illustrator in this class. So let's get started. The first thing to look at is this front page here. When you open up Illustrator, you'll notice that this page will be shown. And this is typically the home page, as you can tell, since the home page is highlighted here. And then there's a bunch of recent files here. Just remember that there may not be anything here the first time you open this, since you don't have any files that you've made. Since I have opened up numerous amount of files through this year. As you can see, there are a bunch of files here that are shown. As you start to make your own projects and your own files, your files will also be shown in the recents area. And you can tell by the recents by being here, recent. But we're going to look past this for a second and just think of it as if there's nothing there. What we want to look at, though, is we want to look at a little bit of the interface. This gives you a little bit of a default starting point here. As you can see, there's a letter, a postcard, Commons, iPhone, all that sort of things to kind of work with as a default. And we want to look at create, new, and open. You can find the create, new, and open on the side here, or you can find it up in file right here. So there's a new and there's an open here as well. Okay. So we want to do the create new first. So we go to create new, and what happens is a new document option pops up here. And right off the bat, you can see that we have some recent items. So these are the recent items that I've used so far. And normally there wouldn't be anything here, but at the top you could see here there's mobile, web, print, film and video, art and illustration. And all of these are pretty much default documents. So if we go to, say, print, for instance, we're going to go to print, you can see here that within a print setting, it shows default print options for new documents. So instead of having to put your own information in, you can select one of these. Okay? And typically with this class, we're not going to do too many different things unless dependent upon the assignment. We're just going to use letter for now, okay? And then we also have, but there's also film and video and art illustration here, and you can see there's poster size. There's an A4 here. There's a legal document, or not document, but a legal type size paper, which are typically for legal documents. And there's even film and video if you had to create something for, say, a banner or something for Premiere or After Effects. But we're going to start with print for a second. So we're just going to click on letter, start this as our base default, and then look on the right side. So first of all, we have our presets, okay? Preset details right here. And then we have Untitled 1. This is basically just the title of your document. So I'm going to type in a title for this document. Title test, okay? So that's just the title test. Now you can keep it untitled if you want to. And when you save it, it's going to ask you to save it as a different file name. But if you want to put your own titles in here, that's perfectly fine as well. Then you'll notice that there's a width and a height. Okay, width, height here. We have points. If we click on that, you'll notice that there's different types of dimensions. Pixels, points, picas, inches, feet in inches, yards, millimeters, centimeters, and meters. And this changes every so often when a new version of the program comes out. But we're just going to stick with what we know. And what we mostly know is inches. So let's click on inches for a second. So as you notice, when we click on inches, the width and the height actually change. They change from 8.5 to 11 because there's a difference between points, how many points are in an inch, and how many inches there are. Okay, and they'll change based on what you pick. So pixels, points, picas, inches, and so on. Okay, and we're going to stick with inches for now. That's what we all know, and that's what is easier. And so this is going to be our dimensions for this particular aspect. So whenever you get a new assignment of some sort, and I ask you to change the dimensions, make sure you change this first before you start to change the actual numbers. Okay, so change it to inches first, and then change the numbers. All right. Also, if you notice, width is on top and height is on the bottom, which means that any type of number that I give you, so if I say I need you to make a file with a, say, 17 by 11, right? The first number that I tell you will always be first. It will always be width, 17, and then the height will be second, so 11. Okay? Let's change that back to 8.5. There we go. And you also know is that we have an orientation here. So the orientation is basically a portrait or a landscape. This is portrait, which is a vertical portrait. So I'm going to create that so you can see that. So you can see that our artboard is now lengthwise, it is vertical. And if we change it to landscape, you'll notice that lengthwise it is horizontal. Okay, so lengthwise is horizontal here. All right, portrait and then landscape. Okay. All right, so we're not going to look at the bleed area. This is actually something to do with file formatting, and we're not going to look at the bleed today. This is mostly going to be learned within the advanced area. And then we have a few other parts here. We have CMYK, RGB, which we'll talk about later, and then the raster effects at 300 ppi, and then a preview mode at default. So everything else will be pretty much the same default, and really it's only the width and the height and the dimensions that should be looked at. So let's do a portrait. So here's a portrait. Okay, here's a portrait file. And let me reformat all of this. Let me do essentials. There we go. Okay, so you'll start out something like this. This is kind of how your UI or your interface will look whenever you first open up Illustrator. Okay? The first thing that you want to do, though, is actually change this a little bit. We want to go up here to this little options here. This is a switch workplace options, and you click on that. And I want you to change it to Essentials Classic. When you change to Essentials Classic, let me reset this real fast. There we go. You'll notice that there's a few more things in here. There's more panels here on the left side, on the right side. There's an options bar up on the top here, and there's probably more tools on the left side as well. Okay, this is probably preferred at this point, just so that you can kind of see where everything is. And then if you want to change that, you can. And we're actually going to change it now. So there's a few panels that we don't necessarily need at this point. All the panels are necessary, but for now, learning the basics of this program, there's not really any panels that we need that are extremely important at this point, except a few. So we're just going to kind of take some panels off. So the properties panel, we're actually going to take this off. Now the properties panel is very important, but we're actually going to be looking in other areas for different things. So we're going to actually take this off. So I'm just going to click the X on that, and then I'm going to move the libraries out of here as well, because we're not going to use the libraries either. And we're just going to click this little tiny expand panels tab here, and you can see the panels expand and they are bigger. So there's a few panels in here that we technically don't need, but we're going to leave some of them here. Like, for instance, we don't need asset exports here. We don't need the artboard here either because we're not dealing with the artboard entirely. We don't really need transparency because we're not dealing with transparency in this class. That will be for the advanced. We'll keep the gradient in there because you might want to work with the gradient. We'll keep the stroke in there because the stroke is kind of nice to use. We could take appearance out. We can also take graphic styles out as well. We want to keep our swatches. We'll keep our brushes even though we may not use them, but we'll take our symbols out because we technically don't need the symbols either. Swatches are important. The color panel is important, and the color guide is important as well. Okay, and then we have our layers too. And our layers are probably the most important panel in this program. So I actually like to take my panels out and kind of make it a little bit bigger here because you'll be dealing with a lot of sublayers basically when we get to this point. So if you somehow say, okay, oh my gosh, I lost my layers panel, right? And you need your layers. You can always go to Window at the top right here, and then all of these in your Window menu are your panels. So if you lose a panel, you can always go back to it. So I can click back on layers like so, and then my layers are back up like that. Okay? So even if you lose a panel, that's okay. Just go to Window and then find the panel that you're looking for and click on it. And they're pretty self-explanatory by the fact that they are named what you would expect them to be named as. And there's a few in there you probably don't know. The best way to learn it, though, is just click on it. Click on it and see what happens. If it's not what you're looking for, then just click, just select off of it. So, like, for instance, pattern options. I click pattern options pops up. I don't need this, so I'm going to click this little X right here on the panel, and it's gone. Okay? So that's pretty much what the panels do. And you'll find out a lot of different things with the panels as you start to move through most of the projects and utilize these panels correctly. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the menu bar up here. So this is a menu bar. And you can see it's a typical Windows PC menu bar. So you have File, you have Edit, right? The two defaults that are pretty much on almost all programs. And then you have menus that are specific to the program that you're using. And even the things inside these two will be specific to the program as well. But you normally see File and Edit there. So if we start with File, you can see that there's a New and there's an Open, right? New and then Open. Don't worry about New from Template, and don't worry about Open Recent Files, or there's another Open in here, I think, or it might be actually in Photoshop. But don't worry about those either. The only ones you need to really worry about is New and Open. Okay, New creates a new document, and then Open will actually create a file that you need to open. If you're working on a file already, you can click Open, and it will open that file. And then you have Save. So we have Save and Save As. Now, remember, always save every 5 minutes. Make sure you save every 5 minutes, because if not, the programs could crash on you, and you will be left, maybe crying because you've lost all your work. Maybe if it has a save on there, a closed save, it might save it for you, but you should always save it yourself. So save every 5 minutes, okay? So you want to start with Save As. I like to use Save As because it gives me all my information here, and I can kind of see what I have. I can change the Save As type. I can change the file name. I can do all of that. Okay, and then everything else is pretty much we're not going to learn in this class. Edit, you'll come in to edit, and you'll see some of the editing aspects to it, like you can copy and paste, or you can use the hotkeys, and I'll explain the hotkeys a little later. You have object here, which this deals with anything with an object in your scene. So for instance, if we had an object in our scene like this, if we had this square here, we can actually go to object and then change some things here in the object using the menu options. Okay. Then we have type. Type has everything to do with typography. So if we say had a word here, and this is actually gibberish. This is just like a graphic design gibberish. It doesn't mean anything. It's not a language. It's just there as a placeholder. So if we go to type, you can see there's a bunch of type options there. So this deals with typography. Then we have select. Allows you to select things, how you select things. We have effects. You can add effects to specific objects in your document. We have view, the way that you view a document. Okay, so you can look at how you view that document. You can see certain things that the document can add in there. So for instance, we can turn on and turn off smart guides here. We can turn on snap to points, which both of these are already on by default. We can show rulers if we want to. I can show the rulers, so the rulers are up here. We can create guides. So you can see guides, hide, lock guides, and how you create a guide is actually by clicking on the ruler and dragging that down, and that is actually a guide. So you can have like a horizontal guide here or even a vertical guide, and it's a really good way of kind of working if you're trying to get things exact, because they'll actually be positioned on top or snap to these guides. Okay, and so let's delete those. And there's a lot of other things that you can do within the view options as well. So there's outline mode. You can change the presentation mode, the screen mode, a few other things. We're not going to use really a lot of these through the class, but just know that they're there so that you can kind of see and how they work. And then we have window, and as I talked about already with the panels, the Windows options here shows all your panels that you have available, as well as a few other things that you can find in your UI. It's basically a UI setup. So any of your panels here, you can change your workstation, you can open up a new window, you can add in a toolbar here, which is right here. You can turn off your control panel or your control options here. This is your control options bar. And it's just basically everything that you see on your interface here. And then we have help, which obviously is just a typical thing you see in programs anyway, and you can find help for Illustrator or tutorials. But to be honest, the best place to find most helpful things is on the internet. Help can help quite a bit, but I would say there's probably more information on the internet than there is actually in the help, which is kind of funny. And then that's it. That's basically the UI right there. And then we have the tools here. And so we'll talk about the tools in another video. But that is essentially what the interface is of Illustrator. If you have any questions about the interface or need to find a location for something, just let me know.